Hey, that should we should be better at computers.
We are indeed testing in production. Yeah, we should be better at. No, audio visual is still ridiculous on computer. That's why everyone hates Skype. I have a dude. I have sitting in my office. I have one, two, three different headsets, an audio interface, USB adapters, and I have a USB 8-channel audio mixer. Because at different times, on and off with different pieces of software, I had to use these things to get audio to work. Because it's so simple, right? Just plug and play. It's Bluetooth, right? It'll just pair. Everything's awesome. Ah,
It's 2019. This is getting sad.
it is. We can make like
Also, I just want to mention
swarms of
this.
flying robots do things, right? We can make swarms of flying
It used to
robots.
be it used to be the joke was that the Linux desktop was like the joke, right? We would say like this is the year of the Linux desktop.
Yeah,
You're frozen. Can you hear me?
you're frozen.
Crap. Oh no. This sucks so bad.
Oh my god. We had.
Why?
You know what's sad is that the two first streams we did,
Oh no.
we did like ad hoc on wireless and everything went fine. And now, whenever we're home, it just blows up in our faces. It's the, Matt. Oh no, he just disappeared totally. Hey,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and you're not frozen. So
This sucks so bad.
why? What happened?
Nothing. This whole thing is an absolute train wreck. My network connection just went down. I couldn't ping anything, and I just reset my Wi-Fi adapter, and it starts working. It's ridiculous.
Okay, all right, here we go.
Let's try if we
Um,
could. Let's see if we can try to fit a stream in the next like 5 minutes when another until the next catastrophe happens.
I'm not touching any. No buttons are being touched on my computer. In fact, I'm just gonna clear everything away. All right, so welcome to the April. Is it April still? It's April, right?
Yes, it is April the
The
29th.
29th. 29th. Welcome to April 29th, 2019 edition of the Energy Labs live stream. Um, so what are we going to talk about today, Matt? We actually have quite a few things to talk about.
Well, the next big version is 0.4.0, and there's a bunch to talk about there. One of the things that we've had to deal with a little bit is a lot of the folks contributing aren't super familiar with either Git or GitHub. I wonder, Derek, if you might be interested in just walking through. We have docs on this, but it'd be nice to, I think, do like a visual walkthrough on um, like what just starting out. Like if you just are looking at the curriculum, you feel like you have an idea to contribute. Where do you start, and how do you end in a pull request to actually contribute your stuff? Not the whole thing, obviously. We've got docs for the
Yeah.
details, but for the stuff
Um,
that you know the stuff that people tend to find like really difficult because they're not used to it, especially when it comes to like GitHub. That's like the biggest thing is navigating the terminology and the user interface there and all of that.
okay, so let's start by just going over what the GitHub repository looks like. Um, so you can actually follow along if you guys want. You can just watch me. It doesn't really matter. If you go to github.com/nre-learning, um, well, that's the GitHub account. That's the spot where all of the Nre Labs stuff is, and you'll see that there are 25 repositories, but it's really five of them that sort of are the main repositories for the project. And we'll kind of go over these right now. Um, by scrolling down. So first we have AnyDote.web. This is our web front end. So when you go to when you go to Energy Labs, labs.network reliability.engineering, all of that front end is inside this AnyDote.web repository. So it's separated out from the back end, which is good, and from the actual course, the lessons themselves, which is good. Uh, Energy Labs curriculum. This is where all the actual public lessons are for that website. Um, let's go here. Actually, we can click on lessons, and then you see they're broken up into categories: fundamentals, tools, and workflows. If you go to fundamentals, and you'll see numbered or descriptions of the lessons in the directory. Um, I won't get into too much detail, I guess, about that now, or maybe I should. I don't know. Well, here, let's click on YAML. Uh, let's go to stage one. Huh, that's interesting.
What's up?
Where's the YAML file?
Which one?
The syringe file. Is this lesson.meta YAML? Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah, yeah. That's the one.
Okay, so this is I'll go over what a lesson looks like in the GitHub repository. You'll see in you know underneath the lesson category, underneath the actual lesson, you'll see a YAML file here. In That's in every single one of these lessons, and this is actually a description of the lesson, including a description of the sandbox environment that the lesson uses to illustrate whatever it is, whatever concepts we're trying to get across in the lesson. Um, and among it, this one's just about YAML, so it's not that interesting. Let's pick a different one. We'll pick lessons, tools, JSnappy. We'll see. We have the YAML file here. Of course, it has the lesson name, the lesson, a unique number identifying the lesson. There's a lesson diagram to go with the lesson, that kind of thing. Description, some other metadata. But what's really interesting here is where it says utilities and devices. I'll start with devices. These are the actual network, the virtual network devices that are in the lesson. So in this case, we have 3 VQFXs in the lesson. Um, so we have a name for them, and we have a source image. This is the container image, and of course there's 3 of them. And you'll see that there's actually 1, 2, 3 different source images, and there's a reason for that. Um, if these are in order to make them boot in a reasonable time, each of these is actually a snapshot, and we can't use the same snapshot over and over again because then all the nodes would have the same MAC addresses, and that doesn't, as we learned, doesn't actually doesn't work so great. So you need to have we made 3 different ones and snapshotted each of them. Um, so these are like nodes on a graph, right? And then we have connections, which are edges on the graph, and they describe how the nodes on the graph are interconnected. And we can see there's 3 connections here, and there's an AN and a BN, so QFX1 and 2, 2 and 3, and 3 and 1. So we're making a triangle out of these 3 VQFXs. Um, you'll notice there's no interface names here, and the reason in this case why that's true is because um, you can actually guess what the interface names will be by looking at this list. This is an ordered list, right? So this connection will be made first, this one will be made second, this one will be made third every single time this lesson is spun up. And we know from how these work that this will be GE001, right? The first time a node is mentioned in a connection, that interface will be GE001 in the case of VQFX. So this is GE001 to GE001. Then you'll see VQFX2 is mentioned a second time. That means that this will be GE002 connected to GE001 on VQFX3, and then here's 3 mentioned a second time. That'll be G002 connected to VQFX1, G002, since it's the second time VQFX1 is mentioned. Um, you can read them that way, and there's actually a number of appliances, regardless of vendor, that kind of work that way. So we're making this triangle topology of these VQFXs. Then we have a utility node called Linux One, and this node is a Linux host that you can access the management interface via netconf, or you can even get to CLI if you wanted, into each of these devices. This does not strictly speak sit on this network. It sits on, if you will, an out-of-band management network, which is not depicted here. Um, so when this lesson starts, how do these things get their initial configuration? Well, back in this directory, where that lesson description file is, you'll see these stages. If you've used Enery Labs, you know that uh, if you use Enery Labs, then you'll know that each lesson is a set of stages, and each stage is like a mini lesson, right? So we'll have a lesson, we have a lesson on YAML, and there's multiple stages in that lesson that teach different aspects of YAML, like one on YAML list and one on YAML, whatever. Um, so for each stage, there has to be a some default configuration that you're going to load onto those devices, and if you and this is where they're located underneath the stage directory, along with the actual text of the lesson for that stage. And here we have, the configurations for stage one for each of the nodes that we just talked about in that YAML file. And we've chosen to use XML here, just because you don't have to worry about white space when using a language like that. This is good to know. If you're looking to make or contribute lessons to the project, then having that sort of remembering how lessons are laid out like that is extremely useful.
So we have there's some there's a comment. Beer Clock also points out there's some contributing documentation. There's also references to a lot of this stuff. So like if you want to know like what the different fields are in a metadata file for a lesson, for instance, or any metadata file, you'll see we're going to be coming out with a few different types of resources and antidotes. So any metadata file, the full reference of what field does what, that's going to be in the docs. Um, One thing that's pretty common for people to get tripped up on, especially if we're talking about like network engineers who aren't used to doing anything in GitHub. Derek, do you mind overviewing like the process of like, okay, you're basically at the beginning, you're considering contributing a lesson. Um, what's the kind of stuff you need to start doing, and then we can sort of skip over the reference part of actually grinding out the lesson, because like I said, I think there's docs for that, and then ending with a pull request, or forking the repo and ending with a pull request. What's like the full life cycle there?
Well, okay, so if the first thing is obviously you need a GitHub account with the key and all that stuff, right? Um, and what we recommend, I'm gonna actually let me finish. I'm not gonna go deep into each of these, but I'm gonna mention all of these, so I'm gonna cover that real quick. Um, before we touch on that, Matt, the other um, the other three, I would say the other two really important directories are the syringe directory. That's the scheduler for antidote. That's the component that reads in that YAML file we were just talking about. And then there's antidote, which at this point is really a docs repository. Uh, and the last thing is, and this will gateway into what Matt asked about just now. The antidote self-medicate repository, which is actually one of the first things you ought to do if you want to consider doing a lesson. You're going Antidote self-medicate is actually a way that you can run the entire website local on your computer. And if you're going to be contributing lessons, that's what you need to download first. Well, Not first. You have to have a hypervisor installed, like VirtualBox or KVM. And once you have that installed, you can, which by the way is in the docs, you can install Antidote Self-Medicate. Um, it's really recommended that you use Antidote Self-Medicate to build your lessons. It's designed to be easy to use and to make it easy to spin up a local copy and make changes to your lesson, and then quickly refresh and see how they look and work and all that stuff. Um, so once you download Self-Medicate, the first thing you're and it's everything's valid, that, and that Minikube is working as well as VirtualBox or KVM. Um, you're going to want to clone this Enery Labs curriculum directory that has all the lessons in it uh, onto your computer. And actually, no, that's not true. Let me back up. I'm jumping ahead. What you want to do is you want to fork this directory to your own account. And if we go to my repositories, you'll see I have a forked copy right here. Once you fork this, then you're going to want to clone this directory into the same parent directory that you cloned self-medicate into when you installed self-medicate. Um, Once you do that,
Um,
yeah,
one quick thing. The fork button is at the top right. You just click that. It'll ask you where to fork it. So like what
yeah,
basically, your username is probably a good bet. That's what Toad did. So it'll ask you where you want. Basically, what it's doing is it's creating a copy at the point where that repository currently is. So it doesn't keep your fork in sync automatically. There's ways to do that yourself, but it doesn't do it for you. Just wanted to call that out. The fork button over to the top right does that for you.
yep. Yeah, so you would have clicked fork. So now you have a copy of this and you've cloned it into the same parent directory that you cloned self-medicate. At that point, you can load self-medicate and you should be able to see all those lessons and everything working on your local development in your local development environment, whether it's on your laptop or your some PC or server that you're doing this on. It's kind of recommended. It's my recommendation that you have, depending what you're doing, enough RAM to support that lesson. If you're going to load up 3 QFX images and other components, you're going to want 16 gigs of RAM or more to do that. If you're just doing YAML lessons, you could probably get away with 8 gigs of RAM altogether. Uh,
Yeah, it's going to wildly depend on the lessons that you're loading. In fact, in the very, very near future, what we're finding is some of the lessons require actually not just a lot of resources in terms of like RAM and CPU, but just by virtue of using nested virtualization, which we often have to do, even in the cloud, even in the production instance, because we're running inside of GCP VMs. Um, just the fact that we're using nested virtualization, there's just not enough. There's no amount of RAM or CPU we can throw at the problem to make it faster. It's still going to be super slow. So one of the things we're going to be doing in the near future is because of only this is only true for a few of the lessons, but some of the lessons are using what we'll call full versions of a network device. We've actually done a lot of tricks with most of the lessons existing that really lightens them and doesn't make it as much of a problem that we're running in nested virtualization. But it's that only goes so far. So in the near future, we're going to be moving the production cluster to a sort of a bare metal as a service provider to get better, much better performance on that side of things. Um, as a result, if you want to be able to develop those kind of lessons with those full featured network devices, and it's not just Junos, by the way, there's a lot of other devices that'll require this, I'd imagine. Um, then more than likely you're going to want to run self-medicate on bare metal. Maybe you have a big server that you want to dedicate to developing lessons. So one cool thing that self-medicate does, or rather Minikube, which is the sort of miniature Kubernetes installer that we use underneath self-medicate, you can actually provide a flag there that says, hey, don't use any VM at all. Just spin up Kubernetes and containers locally. Now, naturally, you have to be running on Linux for that because they're Linux containers. So you can't be running in a VM. Um, but we'll be providing that option in the near future for you to say, hey, look, I'm running bare metal. Just spin everything up locally in a container. Don't use any VMs.
yep. So So after you've cloned it and you verified that you can actually see the lessons that you've cloned on your laptop, you're going to want to open up an issue back at the original NRE Learning NRE Labs curriculum repository. In this case, one of our coworkers opened up a an issue to do an EVPN lesson, and he tagged it curriculum, which is what you want to do in this case. And here you just more or less declare your intention to do. Um, uh, you're gonna declare your intention to create a lesson here, um, and as you can see, if you use the wrong terminology, Matt will swoop in and let you know that you've used the wrong terminology. Please use the term
Anyways,
lesson as we'll be using course elsewhere in the project. Okay.
anyways, the one thing to note is the curriculum label is useful, but one of the reasons we had that there is because we used to, for those that have been around for a little bit, the lessons used to be in the Antidote repo, which housed a lot of stuff, which is why you see the curriculum label on everything. It was a way that we were able to keep issues about the curriculum separate from issues about, say, the infrastructure. Anyways, since then we've split things out. So the only thing in this repo now are curriculum things. So you can use the label if you want. You won't break anything, but we're not super strict on that anymore.
So after you've done that, that's just sort of uh, saying that that you're going to work on that, so someone else doesn't get the same idea or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's the
Um,
main thing is opening
yeah.
the issue.
So at that point, you're going to go through the process, which I'm not going to go into detail here, of actually iterating over, building your lesson, iterating over, and refining it. Um, and then at some point, you're going to be happy with what you did. In which case, you can do a pull request. Here, let me go back to my repository. You'll commit it, back up to GitHub, and then you're going to want to do a pull request. Um, which I have nothing here to actually show, but that's what you're going to do. You're going to do a pull request. Now, here's some examples of some pull requests. Um, so we'll go with final adjustments and promotion of. This is one of them. So uh, Matt made some changes to Jet and OpenConfig lessons, and as a result of his refinements, he was based on that commit. There's 5 commits. He created a pull request against that. Uh, there's some discussion about the actual lesson here, and then the whole idea here is once you open the pull request with what you're wanting to contribute, there'll be some kind of discussion around your contribution, both from various people. Here we have 3 or 4 different people chiming in on this lesson. And you'll continue to make adjustments, etc. And then at some point, that pull request um, will be merged. Review required. And then once it's merged, it goes into PTR.
So, very briefly, could you go back to the NRE Labs curriculum site, the repo rather?
Yep.
So if you actually go to your fork, I'll give people a little hint. Sorry, I have to watch the stream to see your screen, and it's like 5 seconds delayed. Go to your fork for the repo. Cool. So basically, you can see right here where it says this branch is 4 commits behind NRA Learning Master. That's the reason it says that is because, as I mentioned, Toad, when he forked this, it was probably some time ago, either a week or a few days ago, and there have been changes to the root repository since then. So what that's doing is it's basically just saying, hey, this is behind. It's not a huge deal, or it might not be a big deal. It kind of depends on what changed. he might be able to continue working on his copy and not affect anything. If for some reason the commits that were applied to the root repo kind of overlap with the ones that he makes in his branch here, if they conflict, that'll result in something called a merge conflict, which sounds scary, but we have ways of fixing that. So, basically just try your best to keep your fork up to date, and there's ways to do that if you just read through how to use Git. The main reason I pulled this up is because if you have made commits, Toad hasn't. He's just 4 commits behind, but it might also say 4 commits behind and say maybe like 2 commits ahead. What that means is you have commits in your local fork here, the fork that you made, you've pushed commits here that the root repository that you forked from doesn't have. And the reason we call it a pull request is because what you're doing is you're requesting that the upstream repository owner pulls the changes that you've made in your fork into their root repository. So you're basically saying, look, I diverged from your history back, 2 commits ago, and I've made these changes. Can you make these changes now part of your history? That's why the term pull request exists. And a lot of other sites like GitLab, for instance, use similar terminology. They use the term merge request. Kind of the same thing. Basically, that button pull request is a way for you to quickly open a pull request and effectively join the histories together. Not as useful if you're behind because there's easier ways to do that just on the command line. But if you've made commits on your fork and you'd like to catch things up, opening a pull request with that button is the best way to do it. And one other thing is if you push to your fork, let's say you make a commit and you do a git push to your repo here, it'll also pop up. You can't see it on the screen right now, but there will be a pop up near the top of the screen that says recently pushed branches, and it'll have a big old green button that says open pull request. That's also a very useful way of opening a pull request. I find that that's much more useful to open a pull request because it takes you right where you need to go. You can open a pull request by going to the pull request tab and clicking new pull request, but I find what I just said to be a lot easier to just open it right after you push. And by the way, you don't have to open a pull request only when you're ready to have something reviewed. It's totally acceptable. In fact, usually preferred. Certainly within the realm of software development, I know a lot of teams have worked this way. A lot of my old teams work exactly this way, where you open a pull request as soon as you start making changes, but then you denote sort of in the title or maybe in the discussion or the description that says, "Hey, I'm not ready for review yet. I'm just opening this so you can see what I'm working on." It's a manner of providing visibility into where you work, and it helps both parties too. It helps the reviewers get up to speed with what they're going to have to review in the near future, even if it's not right now. And it also helps the person that's creating the content because it gives others an opportunity to say, "Hey, by the way, did you know that this other thing exists? You're writing it. You're creating a lesson. For instance, you might be using the snippet buttons for your lesson guides, and you might be using the old index format. And somebody can come in and say, "Hey, did you know that you don't have to provide that anymore? You just provide the keyword this, and it does it for you." So things like that. It's totally okay to open a pull request at any time. Just be explicit in letting people know if it's ready or not, ready to be reviewed or not.
Yep. So thank you, Matt. If you, but so let's say you do a pull request and it gets merged. What happens then? Actually, it doesn't immediately go out to the production version of the website. Instead, it goes to this website called PTR dot is it labs
Yeah, it's the main site, and it's the main site, but just with PTR dot at the beginning.
offline for maintenance.
Oh, interesting. PTR shouldn't ever have that, but that's okay. That's why it's a testing site. Um, and I should also mention things don't immediately go to PTR either. That's done nightly. So
Oh, it's done nightly. Okay, so the next day when you go to this website, you'll see what your lesson will look like once it's published to the main site, which should look identical to what you've created on the on the local copy that's on your dev box. That is again, there could be things that go wonky. The reason why we have PTR is because there's still things that could go wonky before it gets pushed out. And PTR is a mirror of the actual deployment that we have in production in Google Cloud. But this is sort of the last gate, if you will, to make sure everything looks good and that it's not going to blow up. And plus, other people can go and interact with your lesson and give feedback, on the PTR website.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and actually that's one of the what that's to be honest, that's one of the easiest ways to contribute to the project is whenever we're going to be doing this going forward now that we have our community site up and running. Anytime we're about to do a new release, what we'll do is a few days ahead of time, at the very least, a few days ahead of time. What we'll do is we'll publish a post there in the community site that says, "Hey, the next version of NRA Labs has been cut, and we've basically put it onto the PTR site, meaning the PTR site is now running the specific version of the project and of the curriculum that we're planning to push into production in a few days. If you go to the PTR site now, it should look exactly like what the main site will look like in a few days. Can you please, go through and run some lessons and just provide us with any feedback that you run into, any problems you run into, let us know." That's one of the easiest ways to get involved with the project because you don't need to know how anything works. You just need to be able to use the site, and that's it, and be able to open GitHub issues to let us know about problems. That's it.
I should really make. I've been saying I was going to make an actual video of uh, of that actually has a contribution and does all the things we described step for step. You know what? I should do that in
Yeah,
the next couple weeks.
yeah. This is pretty informal. I think it would be good to have like a not necessarily like scripted, like robotic, but it'd be good to have that as a reference. Not a lot of people want, especially considering it's not in our best interest to spend time reinventing like GitHub's documentation. Um, it's good to just be able to focus on what we do uniquely.
All right, let's get back
So,
to the stream.
shall we do it? Shall we do an overview of one or O.4.0?
Yes, please go ahead.
Cool. So, when was the last time you listened to the stream? Can you make sure you can hear me and whatnot?
Oh, I'm pretty sure everyone can hear Matt, correct? Still.
Oh, yeah, I just tuned in. I can hear myself. Okay, so let me. Are you able to show my screen if I share it? By the way,
Yeah.
if I can do that application window instead. How about that? All right, can you see that? Okay.
Yep. It is now. Well, you might want to zoom in. Also, I'm seeing two screens, and one of them is the monitor you have turned sideways, doing a lot of pings.
That's weird because I specifically selected show my application, so that is not okay. I literally told Discord to only share Mozilla Firefox.
Yeah, it's doing it again.
That is frustrating. Good thing I didn't have anything nefarious over here, like my hacking,
Your Overwatch hacking.
my Overwatch hacking. That's a huge bummer.
Is that is that a Linux box that you're on?
It is.
Yeah, so most screen sharing apps are broken in Linux because they don't know how to do multi-screen. They just capture both screens like they're one.
Okay, I'll just change my display settings for a second. Give me a second. Um,
Which is why I do the stream on Windows. So if you're just joining us, because I see somebody had just joined us, Matt and I are about to talk about version 0.4.0, which is coming up It's a major step that we're taking towards version 1.0, which will be coming soon this quarter, I think. Um, and Matt is currently disconnecting his second monitor so that it works, right?
Shut up. Linux desktops are awesome,
They are awesome. When
except
I'm
for
not doing the
this.
stream, I boot back into my Pop OS.
Okay.
There we go.
Woo!
Hooray! We did it.
When in doubt, unplug it. Okay. Anywho,
We're pros at this.
we clearly. What's worse is that there are like 18-year-old kids that make $3 million a year doing this, and they do it so much better. Anyway, so so yeah, as Derek was saying, 0.4.0 is kind of the next big thing. There's actually some story here. We've been lately thinking about, so in the background, obviously one of the things that we want to do, just because this is a project that's near and dear to our heart, we want to get a lot of people involved with it, and we have pretty significant ambitions in that respect. One downside, not downside, but one thing that has because of those ambitions, we've had to seriously consider the longevity of the project. Meaning, what do we need the project to do when it gets to like a 1.0 kind of thing? And a lot of those concerns are about features and functionality, but also in terms of like scale, even security to a degree. There's a lot of things that need to be considered. And so what we've been doing in the past really few months is really starting to tangibly think about what 1.0 looks like. And this is still something we're working on, and so we haven't really published anything there yet, just because it's still so much in flux. But 0.4.0 is the first major. I mean, if you're being pedantic about it, in Semver terminology, it's a minor release, but the first big release that puts us on the path to 1.0, because 0.4.0 is going to include a lot of features that are pretty significant. One of which is, and you can see it, I don't even have a GitHub issue for it yet. It's sort of a note. We're looking at bare metal as a service providers. One is Packet. They're literally just called Packet. They're pretty cool. They're a CNCF. They're related. CNCF either runs their stuff on Packet or they invest somehow. I can't remember the relationship there, but they're very closely aligned with CNCF, which is the folks that house the Kubernetes project and a lot of other cloud native kind of things that we actually use within the project. Not every one of these issues in the plan. By the way, if you want to look at this, you can look at it. It's NRA Learning/project/9, as I have done with every single release since we launched in October of 2018. Every single release gets a GitHub project. So if you have any doubts or questions as to what's being worked on, this is the place to go. I have been religious about making sure that anything's in here. If only for my own sanity, because it helps keep things, collected for myself, but also it's public, so you can see it. Not every one of these issues is groundbreakingly different. For instance, there's always going to be some bug fixes and small feature enhancements and things like that. There's always going to be new lessons. So intermingled with the plan, you're going to see things like new problems with existing lessons or new lessons or additions to lessons. All of that's still going to be in play here. This isn't just about the platform itself. But there's also big features, like for instance, in the SYRCTL tool, what we want to do is have an interactive wizard for building a new lesson, so that you don't have to start from scratch and just copy somebody else's directory and reverse engineer it and try to figure out how to get your lesson working. We want to help with that. We want to help make that a little better. So that's one of the things we're going to work on. There's other things like being able to like click a button in the web UI that goes straight to the source of that lesson in GitHub. I think that'd be pretty cool. A lot of like statically generated websites that use GitHub pages have that kind of thing where you can say like view the source for this in GitHub. We've invested a lot of time in making the lesson content itself done as code and available in GitHub. So we should have functionality like that, so you can see very easily just from the lesson itself go straight to the source of how that lesson is defined. So there's a lot of stuff like that in this lesson. What I'm doing at the moment, there are some sort of quote breaking changes to Syringe, just because of some of the terminology that we're switching around. You know what? I'm gonna spoil a little bit of the plan. I'm not gonna go crazy about it. But one of the things that we've done up until now is Antidote as a project has been pretty centered around lessons. and that's for good reason. Lessons are a big part of what we've done. Um, and by lessons I mean when you go to a page and you learn something, YAML, Jinja, or JSnappy or Napalm, like those are all individual lessons that you learn something about. And certainly we're going to continue using that. That's like the keystone for a lot of what we're building. But what we're finding is that they're not as compelling as they could be just on their own. What we've thought about is adding other things into the project that helps either people find content more easily, for instance, or maybe helping people, sort of work their way through a set of lessons. Maybe there is a bunch of lessons that sort of have something in common with each other, and you just want to be able to find those lessons more quickly. There might be things you know, like the interactive lab that provide, the lab experience that a lesson provides is cool, but maybe you want to be able to do some really quick, like knowledge based learning. So maybe having something like a multiple choice quiz in conjunction with a practical lab, instance. Maybe those two things together will really, really help enhance the learning experience. So there's just a whole bunch of different resource types, in addition to simply lessons that we've thought of. And what we're doing is we're centering everything around this new model that's curriculum centric. So when you're looking at, say, the NRA Labs curriculum, that repository in GitHub, we used that terminology when we moved it, very intentionally, because we sort of saw the writing on the wall and we knew that we were going to have to center everything around a curriculum. So when you stand up, for instance, your own version of Antidote, or when we stand it up in the cloud in production for the main NRA Labs site, what we're doing is we're centering everything around a curriculum, and that NRA Labs curriculum repo is the main curriculum for us. It's not the only curriculum that you can use. You can create your own, but it's the one that we're creating and we're collaborating on for the community. And everything is nested as sort of children resources underneath this curriculum. And so you'll see in the curriculum in that repo, you'll see a directory that says lessons. Obviously, we still have lessons. That's like the main thing in NRA Labs and in Antidote. But we have other resource types that we're thinking. For instance, collections. That's going to be something that we're going to be coming out with in 4.0, and I sort of breezed over it in the last screen, but it's there in the plan. That's one way that we're thinking about grouping certain lessons together, maybe not necessarily by category, but maybe perhaps by lesson author. For instance, maybe a VAR reseller comes in and says, "Look, I want to contribute a lot of our knowledge to the community, but I'd like for people to understand where all of that came from and maybe get some credit for that." And for people to learn, where they can find out more about some of this information. So we've thought about this, and one of the things we're going to be doing is introducing a concept called collections that group those kind of lessons together. It's not a recategorization. We'll still have categories for things like what kind of tools or fundamentals or workflows are being discussed. That's still going to exist. This is more like another axis of categorization. So more on that in the near future. We'll show you that feature in action at near the end of the 0.4.0 cycle. Another thing is quizzes. I mentioned this before. Multiple choice questions. That might be pretty cool to couple with a set of lessons where maybe the lesson does like a practical walkthrough of a concept, but before you get there, maybe you want to take a quiz on seeing where your knowledge is, so you can see where like maybe you need to fill in some gaps, or maybe you're rolling out a curriculum to somebody or a group of people, and you want to quote like certify that they know what they're doing. You can sort of join quizzes with the lessons for a full like knowledge plus interactive experience. That might be pretty cool. There's also courses we're thinking about creating. For instance, it's nice that these lessons are grouped in a sort of a technical way, like what lessons are about tools or fundamentals or whatnot. But there might be another way of thinking about it. For instance, let's say I want to learn everything there is to know about network testing. I want to know everything that you have to offer in the NRE Labs curriculum that has to do with network testing. And I want to be, quote, certified. We'll use that term for now loosely on network testing. I've seen everything that NRE Labs offers. What we can do is we can create a course that sort of navigates through all of the other stuff, and just focuses only on the lessons and the quizzes that are relevant to accomplishing that end goal. This is a piece of metadata that we're thinking about creating to help folks navigate through the dearth of content that is NRA Labs, because there's quite a bit of content, and given our ambitions, we imagine that that's just going to explode. And so we want to provide some guidance through the noise, so to speak. And if you only want to focus on one specific outcome, we'll help guide you through that. And then finally, there's another resource type we're thinking about. And so, for instance, if you've gone through a course, for instance, let's say you went through the network testing course, it'd be nice if you could point to either sort of a badge or some kind of indication that you've done that. And we're gonna be talking a lot about this in the near future. But one thing that we're playing with is on our community site with the discourse platform. There is a very straightforward. It's built into the platform to do things like this, so that if you have gone through that course, you can see on your profile, and others can see on your profile in the community site that you've done that. And so maybe if somebody has questions about network testing and they want to know, like, hey, who can I reach out to that might know a lot more about this particular area of study, they can go to the community site and search for people with that sort of badge or that award. Um, and we think that that's going to be really useful in helping people sort of understand each other's specialties, because this is a very diverse field. It's becoming a kind of a complicated set of skills, so it's nice to have some guidance around who knows what. So anyway, that's a big change. This isn't going to happen in 0.4.0. As I mentioned, really the only thing in this screen that we're introducing in 0.4.0 is collections. But I wanted to set the context there because what we're doing in these, especially these major releases, like the minor release versions, 0.4, and then increasing 0.5, basically starting with 0.4, every major release like that is going to be building towards a 1.0. We have a pretty good idea of what we want in 1.0, and so we're going to make sure that every major release like 0.4 is going to start building towards that end goal. So just be aware, it's going to be pretty rare if ever a major release like a 0.4 or 0.5 is not going to have some sort of major change as we build towards that final goal. Yeah, the 1.0 plan isn't quite yet because we haven't finished it, but the 0.4 plan is. Obviously, it's in the GitHub project there. So please feel free to look at that. If you have any questions, just reach out either via Twitter, the community site. If you don't know about that, this is what I was mentioning earlier: community.networkreliability.engineering. It's free to sign up, so just sign up for an account. You can go to any one of these. We're playing with the categories as well. We're going to be adding categories too, but feel free to pop in here and let us know what you think.
All right.
And I've had to sneeze for like 4 minutes.
Yeah. Dude, look how red my nose looks. It's crazy. I think I'm coming down with a cold or something.
I think maybe I transmitted something to you.
That'd be great. Thanks, Matt.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
This stream went way better. Honestly, this stream went way better than the last. And half of the stream was over here, whiteboarding, or actually was over there. The whiteboard was on my futon, and I don't have a good um, distance mic, so I had to use my webcam mic, and it was horrible. It was real bad.
uh, okay. So, what else did you want to cover?
That's it on my list.
Yeah, I think that's
Do we
we
have any
should.
questions?
I don't. Do we have any questions? You know what? We'll give everyone a second here to ask questions, and I'll just go over some what we say every time. I'm Derek Winkworth. You can follow me at CloudToad, CloudToad on Twitter. And this is Matt Oswald. You can follow him at Meerdin, Mierdin, on Twitter. You can also follow NRE Labs on Twitter at NRE Labs. Please follow all of those things. Please join. If you go to the labs.networkreliability.engineering, that is the main NRE Labs site, and you'll see a bunch of social media icons on the top right of your browser window, and that's going to be links to our Discord server, to our Discourse server. So please join those and participate in the discussion. If you have any questions, of course, you can ask on Discourse or Discord, or shoot Matt or I or the NRE Labs account on Twitter a message. Uh, and I don't think we have any questions, so I think we'll wrap it up. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So next time though, we are getting on this. We're getting on the horn at like 20 minutes out to resolve all audio and video issues.
20
Um,
minutes out from like 4 a.m., right? Just to make sure.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah, just to make shut up.
Probably good. That's probably good. Derek's one of those guys that just loves being in the airport.
I like
So
to be. I don't like to rush. I like to be at the airport with enough time to sit down and relax before I get on the plane because I dislike flying immensely, and I don't want to be rushing through the airport trying to. I like to stroll casually, down the terminal hallway and to have a sit and think and maybe eat a breakfast sandwich before I get on my plane.
I prefer
Matt,
to do all of that stuff at home and then just walk onto my plane. So
yeah, Matt likes to run through the airport to get to his plane.
no run, no run,
Hmm.
just walk.
So,
I also like to keep my phone and my car battery charged fully.
yeah, that wasn't the battery. Do you know how much that cost me? I paid $4,500 to fix my pickup.
What?
Yeah, yeah. So if you're
Oh, I
so
feel
anyways,
bad.
I flew. If you guys are still watching, we had to go to San Antonio and talk to a customer, and when I flew back from San Antonio and got to the airport, my truck would not start. I had to get it towed from there to my mechanic, and then
Oh
he called me
Jesus.
with some very bad news, and it was $4,500 all around to fix the various issues they had found. So it's great. I love it when that happens. It's the best. It's my
Wow,
favorite.
that sucks.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Uh, please tune in next week. We'll be streaming again. It'll be, I promise, each time we do this, we'll get a little better than the last. It'll
Just a
be,
little bit.
yeah, a little bit.
Minor increments. Minor increments.
Right. When you're approaching zero and you say you'll get like 10% better each time, then you're only incrementing by a small fraction of amount
Yes.
of an amount. So don't get your hopes up. I'm just saying it will be slightly incrementally
We
better.
promised to get logarithmically.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks everybody.
Take care.